Hey everyone, it's Elaine Hamilton Grundy from the Reiki Center, and this is a video to try and explain the lineage or the progression through the levels. And it's really been inspired because recently, for some reason, I've been getting quite a few requests for Reiki 3. So people who have done Reiki 1 and Reiki 2 with different teachers from different lineages asking if they can jump straight into my Reiki 3. Now, I just wanted to explain my own philosophy around this because I don't want people to think that, oh, I'm making you do Reiki 2 for some kind of like less than ethical or overly rigid reason. So I'm just going to explain the way that I feel lineage works in Reiki and the way of the morphic field. So for those of you who've done Reiki 2 or 3 or Reiki teachers with me, you know that I talk a lot about the morphic field. And essentially, it's a definition coined by Rupert Sheldrake. He's written quite a lot of books around it. And his theory is really around this idea that the memories and information and energetic input actually forms a field around different relationships, around different cultures, around even like the human body. So his thinking is that as you put energy into something, you grow the field. Now, a simple example of that would be, for example, when you're growing up and you're developing a relationship with your family members, and there's this kind of innate understanding of what happens in your family system. And when someone else comes in, it does feel like they're an outsider. There are certain in-jokes, there are certain traditions, there are certain things that you do as a family that create your group. Now, this actually happens in lots and lots of different things. So when we talk about symbology, for example, in Reiki, we talk about how each of the symbols has its own morphic field. And the power of the symbol comes from not necessarily the drawing or the actual way that you use the symbol, but the way that you unlock the information within that symbol. And you could say that in advertising, it's very well known, the repetition and the energy that goes into advertising a consistent, clear message over and over and over again builds energy. It builds recall, and it actually builds, like people actually do stuff, they act on it. So it builds manifestation as well. And over time, logos start to hold the same thing. Like everybody knows the golden arches as McDonald's. Everybody knows the swoosh of Nike. And these energies are part of what we would describe as a morphic field. Lots of energy has gone into it, and therefore it starts to have its own life. It starts to create a life of its own, which is very consistent. So bringing that back to Reiki, when we start to move up the levels, it's important to consider whether or not this is something that resonates with you. But for me, in my experience, in my years of practice, just what I've experienced myself, I do believe this. And so I have seen the symbols grow, and I have seen my lineage grow and become more powerful. So the stepping in to the symbology is actually a very important part when you're moving up the levels. Now, of course, you may have done Reiki 2 with a different teacher. You may have identical symbols, and you may have been taught like different tools around it, or perhaps tools that are not the same as in my system. There is a kind of intention that is set by the attunements. Now, it's also important to realize that throughout the growth and evolution of Reiki, the attunement process has really shifted and changed. So my attunement process may not be the same as your teacher's. Now, that doesn't mean it's better or worse. It just means that the intention, my knowledge of what's inside the morphic field of my lineage may be different to what's inside the morphic field of your lineage. Now, that doesn't mean that, like, if I read a Reiki book and there's a whole bunch of different tools, I can absolutely step into those as well, right? Because I have been attuned to Reiki level 2, which is across the board. So actually, I have access to information, not only within my lineage, but also within the bigger Reiki lineage as well. So I'm not saying that you can only use these symbol tools or those simple tools, but it's more about the intention of the totality of the information being opened by your Reiki teacher. Another way of putting it is like, let's imagine that Reiki is a vast mansion and my attunement opens one room and your teacher's attunement opens another room. There may be some overlap. There may be several rooms that are opened and some of those rooms overlap and some don't. Now, that doesn't mean it's better or worse or whatever. All I'm saying is that if you then go into Reiki level 3, i.e., I now open, you've gone into, let's say, the drawing room of my Reiki part of the mansion, and now I'm opening the drawing room into the lounge area. So you have to step into one room in order to access the other room. If you come in at it from a different wing of the mansion, you may have exactly the same symbols, but you may have a slightly different access point. So then I'm trying to pull you over to my wing when you're already in a different wing. And that makes it more complex. Now, that doesn't mean it's impossible, but when I sit with it, when I think about it, it doesn't feel congruent in my system. I don't feel confident, and I cannot guarantee that your experience in my lineage will necessarily be aligned with what you have already learned. And that is why I really feel quite strongly, actually, that you need to have gone through my Reiki 2 process. Either the Reiki 2 process that is in my tight lineage, so the Reiki teachers I have trained, or the Reiki teachers that have been trained by the Reiki network, that is a wider organization. And if that is the case, then I'm also very comfortable to take you on at Reiki level 3. Otherwise, what I'm suggesting and inviting people do is to go through the Reiki 2 process again. I offer it online. So it's something that I can also offer you online. You can go through it and you can see whether or not there is that congruency. Now, if you're like, okay, I want to show you my stuff first, I'm also very happy to take a look at it. And please understand that I'm not suggesting for a minute that your training is somehow not as good or not the same quality. It's not that at all. It's simply different rooms in the same house. And I want to make sure that you can access my room from where you are. I don't want you having to climb over, the outside of the windows and all that kind of thing. So I'm hoping that makes a bit more sense. I know on the one hand, it's like, well, Reiki is everything. And that is true. Reiki is everything. But the attunements actually do have a certain vibration to them, and they do have a certain access point. So that's really what we're discussing here. Now, I know that not all teachers agree with me. And there's not really much I can do about that. It's if you're listening to this, if it resonates with you, then hopefully you'll go through the hoops that I'm setting. But if you listen and you just think, well, that's nonsense, then that's perfectly fine. And there are many teachers out there that will take you at Reiki 3, and they don't mind what you've done at Reiki 1 and 2. So I totally understand that that's also another way of doing it. But in terms of my lineage, my intention when I set the attunements for you, and particularly at Reiki 3, because now you're learning the master symbol that needs to sit within the other Reiki 2 symbols. And a lot of my teaching is assuming that you already know the Reiki 2 stuff that I have taught. So it gets very confusing if your Reiki 2 tools are a very different set from mine. And it becomes extremely difficult if your symbols are different as well. So all in all, it's just much easier to make sure that you have access to the right wing that I am then going to be teaching onwards from. And of course, if you have got a different lineage or you have a different teacher at Reiki 1 and 2, it just means you have access to more rooms. So there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying for a minute that anything is incompatible. I'm just saying that, we just need to make sure we're opening the right doors. So I hope that makes sense. And I hope that answers some of your questions, particularly if you're wondering, well, why do I have to kind of jump through all these hoops? Why do I have to redo stuff I've already done? Yeah, that's the reason. So I hope that makes sense to some of you anyway. And thank you for watching.